Saudi Arabia, Greece, and American Sniper. I'm Taylor Kinsler, and this is the Square Circle. Hello and welcome to the Square Circle. I'm your host, Taylor Kinsler. Joining us today are Nick Brana of SocioEvolve.com, Gregory Clay of GDClay.com, and political consultant Leif Larson. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Our first topic today is the U.S. relationship with Saudi Arabia. This week, President Obama and his wife traveled to Riyadh to pay their respects to the late King Abdullah. Mrs. Obama refused to wear a headscarf when meeting the new Saudi ruler, prompting consternation from many Saudi writers. So, Gregory Clay, was this a faux pas by the First Lady or an act of courage? And what does this say about the U.S. relationship with Saudi Arabia?
It's called a pseudo-scandal, to be real about the situation. Other dignitaries from the West have gone to Saudi Arabia. My understanding is that there's no requirement for foreign visitors to wear the hijabs and all that. Angela Merkel has been to Saudi Arabia. She didn't wear the hijab, the scarf. Laura Bush didn't do it. Hillary Clinton didn't do it. So the bottom line is that it appears to be an optional situation.
I totally agree with you, Greg.
Oh, I don't believe it.
Well, I think
shock.
This
is a shock.
I think where everybody around the table probably agrees with it. I mean,
no.
I was more amazed that like a broken clock, is right at least twice a day. I agreed with Michelle Obama on this one. She shouldn't have worn it. I mean, it was a great statement.
Right.
And I agree with you also. This was I think a pseudo story, a pseudo scandal. I think what it does is it covered up the story and gave the mainstream media a way of not covering the real story, which is why is this American president in Saudi Arabia for the funeral of the head of state, a tyrant, a king. I mean, albeit he's our tyrant, so there's a little bit of that.
Right.
But this president didn't go to France.
Paris, right.
For the march there. Right. He's missed other funerals for heads of state, both former and in office. Why does he go to this one? Especially when there is a man sitting in prison awaiting another 950 lashes for doing what we were basically doing here.
Right.
A blogger.
Right, the blogger.
I'm with you guys. Look, this distracts from important issues. Like hijab question is silly and unfortunately draws the conversation away from the important fact that Saudi Arabia is a central pillar and conduit of American policy in the Middle East. And for over half a century, Washington and Riyadh have had this agreement. Essentially, it's an exchange where Washington provides security, ensures that the House of Saud will maintain its tyranny, its absolute monarchy there, in exchange for Saudi Arabia providing cheap oil and controlling global energy prices. So throughout this partnership, Saudi Arabia's chief exports have been, one, oil, and two, Wahhabi religious extremism.
Right.
So
remember September 11th.
Exactly.
There you go.
A classified State Department memo from Hillary Clinton identified Saudi Arabia as the largest financier of terrorism worldwide. Last year, Joe Biden admitted that Saudi Arabia and ISIS. Saudi Arabia was ISIS' largest benefactor. Okay, now it gets really crazy though. A classified 28-page chapter of the congressional inquiry into 9/11 identified Saudi Arabia as having financed the attacks on 9/11. It was even discovered that Saudi intelligence officers here on diplomatic visas in the United States were acting as handlers to some of the hijackers. Now that's just insane, as everybody knows 15 of the 19 hijackers were Saudis. For over a decade now, the Bush and Obama administrations have sided with the Saudis in court against the 9/11 families. So after to give you an impression of this 28 pages, after reading the full, still classified 28 pages, Representative Thomas Massey from Kentucky said, I had to stop every couple of pages to rearrange my view of history. It challenges you to rethink everything.
Now, I'd like to remind our audience at home that they can submit their questions to our guests through our website, www.publicsquare.net, and we'll get to as many in the show as we can. So we'll move on now to Greece. Greece's left-wing Syriza party is basking in the glow of its electoral win last week. The new government is already making an anti-austerity moves in keeping with Syriza's campaign promises. But now party leader Alexis Tsipras must begin negotiations with the nation's creditors in the EU, mainly Germany. The negotiations are expected to be tense, and some are predicting that Greece will exit from the EU as a result. Nick, is this the beginning of the end for the European project?
It could be, and it's really interesting because no matter what happens now, the rest of the countries who've been screwed over by this, kind of the south of Europe, who've been screwed over by this German-backed, European Central Bank, IMF-backed austerity regimen, which the Greek finance minister, the new finance minister, accurately described as financial waterboarding. So that this is, I'm talking Italy here, I'm talking Spain, I'm talking Portugal. These are the countries who've really been bearing the brunt. So a little bit of background here is that in the early 2000s, Greece made the mistake of approaching the big American banks like J.P. Morgan and Goldman Sachs and asking it for help with its mounting debt problem. The big American banks said, "Oh yeah, fantastic," and they created this scheme, essentially giving it off-book cash loans in exchange for basically privatizing profits from its infrastructure, like its airport and its highways and this kind of thing. So they created a financial disaster in that country. And then the banks turned around and created a market index and started betting against Greece's default. So they started betting that the financial disaster that they created, that Greece would default on that debt.
Well, I mean, the Greece government and the people there have kind of created this themselves too. I mean, there's no such thing as a free lunch.
Right.
And I think if the new government looks in the corner of their eye, they'll see a little red light blinking, and that's the extent of their success is running out of the 15 minutes of time that they've had with it. It's all the promises they made, they're not going to be able to keep. Even if they opt out of the European Union and go with a Russian-backed offering, which has been forwarded towards them for not backing the sanctions that are against Russia for its incursions into Ukraine, they're still never going to recover to where they can make enough money and have enough money to pay for the programs that they offered the people to get elected. Is it the end of the EU? It could be the biggest problem that they've faced so far. I think some form of the European Union would continue on for quite a while, but it may be the end of the long extended, like you said, some of the Germany, France, some and their close allies may continue on as a European Union, but I think you might see some of the other ones, Portugal and other people drop out.
And Greece has some major problems. I mean, they have a 25% unemployment rate. I mean, if you're in the United States, you're talking 1920s and 30s, Great Depression, 25%. And what gets me is that for those aged 25 and under, the unemployment rate is 50%.
60.
Are you kidding me? And also there's another issue is what does this do in terms of NATO? It's going to have a deleterious effect on NATO. And
well, you could see Greece pull out of NATO, which is what I thought, along with the Russian offering, it eventually come down the line. If they bite into that, then NATO will see a step back from probably Greece in some form. But on that end, NATO, I think, would step up and take Ukraine in as a new NATO ally. So this could all tumble down.
We should give some context here. About you started to talk about how bad it is, but it's incredible. 26% unemployment. GDP has plummeted. Wages have plummeted. Benefits have plummeted.
Big time.
Youth unemployment is staggering, 60%. And the one thing that it was supposed to address, the debt, this austerity regime has blown up the debt ratio. It's been a total disaster.
Your own purpose.
It's created a depression, a deep depression out of what was a recession.
But it's not strictly the economic aspect; it's the cultural aspect in Greece too. These people that have come up since World War II that are millennials and whatnot, they have an expectation of what a job is and what work is that cannot survive.
Right.
They have an idea that, I mean, it's even, as I understand it, it's even less working hours than there are in France,
right.
And higher pay, and 3 or 4 months off every year,
right, which is the vacation capital of the world.
Exactly. So
right. It's crazy.
There needs to be a whole cultural turnaround, which I don't think this government has offered.
Right.
It's basically said we'll give you everything you want.
Right.
Without any pay, which they
free of charge.
I don't think the problem is cultural. I mean, the problem is the austerity, and it was very heartening to see. The Greeks had their version of the Republicans and the Democratic Party before this, who were controlled, the Socialist and the New Democracy Party. They voted them both out this election. They said, to hell with these establishment parties, to hell with this austerity regime. We're not going to kind of bear the brunt of this kind of global financial crisis anymore. The Greek people are not going to bear the brunt of so much of what was done by the American banks, and the multinational banks.
Yeah.
So it's really heartening to see that kind of movement against this 40-year-long neoliberal.
And also a populist movement. Right. I don't think they can survive. They've offered too much, and they just can't back it up.
And also, how is it going to affect the American stock markets? That's a concern of me personally.
I'm not sure, but in 1953,
because I mean, didn't just recently, a week or so ago, a couple weeks ago, wasn't there a big stimulus package among the EU countries? And I mean, it's going to have a major.
You're talking about quantitative easing.
Yeah, it's going to have a major effect on that, and it could, because now we live in a global economy. Now just about anything that happens anywhere in the world, can affect us.
I don't see a complete writing off of the debt. I don't see the Greek government saying we're not going to. We're just saying we're going bankrupt.
No,
we're not going to pay any of this.
And they're not even trying to do that. They want to renegotiate it. Nobody's suggesting that. In fact, in 1953, Germany did that after World War II, when it said, we can't be an effective part of the alliance against the Soviet Union, against communism, unless you restructure our debt. And they did, and they cut their debt in half. Until now, the hypocrisy of Germany telling Greece that no, and imposing this regime on them, it really kind of it even brings back these Cold War and World War II type memories.
Yeah. Do as I say, not as I do.
There we are.
There you go. In a nutshell. Right. Case closed.
Yeah.
All right. We'll move on to our last topic now. So the new film American Sniper has encountered some controversy since its release. The Oscar-nominated film, which depicts the late Marine sharpshooter Chris Kyle, has been praised by some as a heroic portrayal of selfless military valor. Others have criticized the film for its inaccurate connection of 9/11 to the Iraq War and its seeming glorification of Kyle's supposedly racist attitude towards Arabs and Muslims. Leif, what is your opinion on the film?
Well, my opinion is basically opposite of everything that we just said. There's been a lot of talk about, what this film is all about and things that are said, and is this a racist, person's point of view. And a lot of that circles around, and it's put forward in the movie quite a bit. I mean, how many people here saw the movie? I've seen it. Yeah. He does, and they don't step away from it. And they don't hide from it. It's in the book and it's in the movie. He uses the word savages.
Right.
Savages. Right. Now, how many people? Anybody know the definition, Webster definition of savages? I've got a few here for describing a person: fierce, ferocious, cruel, untamed, barbarous, enraged, or furiously angry. Wow. That's what
terrorists are.
Savages
That's what terrorists
use.
are.
Now, and this is a person point of view who was knee deep in a lot of this horrific, blood and gore, whether it was brought on by the U.S. invasion or whether it was brought on by, factions of Islam or what have you. These things were true. I mean, there's a scene in it that everybody points to where he has his sniper sights pinned down on a young boy and a mother who are sent out with a rocket grenade to blow up American troops. And he has to make the decision: does he shoot the boy? Does he shoot the mother? Does he let the bomb go off and kill American troops or endanger them? Sending out women and children, I think we would all agree, for Western culture definition, that is a savage act. Yeah. We find that barbaric to use women and children in a military engagement for those type of purposes.
Okay, but let's follow the causal chain here. Why did we go to Iraq?
Why
did that savage
situation
situation
arise? That goes into the next aspect of why people have so many problems with this. The whole argument revolves around the liberal mind frame that when anyone mentions the war in Iraq, they must tie it with the idea that it had nothing to do with 9/11. You must say that there were no weapons of mass destruction.
And you must blame George Bush.
Blame George Bush for 200,000 dead civilians that were killed by Americans.
First of all, it's more like 1 million, but second of all,
a lot of those were killed by Americans. But that's the progressive mind, and that's why they're against this movie.
To not
see,
say that, or
you
to
know
write
he's going to take the Michael Moore
to write that out of the story
logic on this.
Is
you know
to rewrite history. So
this is his book.
Okay,
though.
but
this
I want to point something out
him.
now. Every president since Reagan has had their Iraq war. Okay, Reagan fueled the Iran-Iraq war. All right, by giving Saddam chemical weapons and targeting surveillance to use against the Iranians. Then George I told Saddam that he wouldn't mind if Saddam invaded Kuwait. After telling him that, he said, actually, I'm going to call you Hitler, and I'm going to involve the United States in the Gulf War. All right. Then Clinton had sanctions, killed 500,000 people. The UN veteran diplomats who were supposed to execute that program refused, calling it genocide. 500,000 children admitted that it killed. Bush Jr. set the record, though, killing 1 million Iraqis, reducing part of that country to a radioactive wasteland that EU radioactivity commissioners say is the most toxic and genetically deformed population ever studied. Okay, Obama now, all right, presumably wanting to join in the tradition, has started the next Iraq war. So it's astounding to me. It's astounding to me that anybody believes these rationalizations that we're going to Iraq, to the country with the 5th largest oil reserve, whatever excuse it might be at the time. Look, the International Energy Agency forecasts that Iraq is going to provide, quote, 45% of the growth in global oil production to 2035 and become the 2nd largest global oil exporter, overtaking Russia. That's what this is about. Okay?
And George,
Iraq was underproducing
but that's not
oil.
what the movie's about.
That's not what the movie's This is about Chris Kyle.
Yeah, but how does anybody believe
the
these
sniper.
stories?
Oh, okay. Well, if we want to talk about stories, did anybody see the movie Selma? A great movie. Loved it.
Excellent movie.
Excellent movie. But based on historical facts,
LBJ
that movie was completely rewritten to represent what the people that produced it and directed it and funded it said they wanted. They didn't want a white salvation,
a white savior
movie.
That's why LBJ was portrayed as being the bad guy, as being the villain.
No, that's why a large portion of the people that also participated in that, especially what his name was Rabbi Heschel, was cut completely out. Why did they cut out the Jewish people that also participated? The famous picture is of Martin Luther King hand in hand with this gentleman, arm in arm, marching across the bridge. He was cut out. Why? He wasn't a documentary.
Hollywood does things for entertainment.
It was a movie based on history for what I guess they would call a docudrama. And it got across what these people wanted to get across. You know, American Sniper was a book written by the person that was the sniper, who was there. It showed how he felt about war, showed about how he grew up and what drove him to see these things this way. And it also basically showed what going through that, what being there costs not only in human sacrifice, but in mental sacrifice for our troops that came back.
And also remember,
not talking anything about the pointlessness of being there to begin with. You know,
it was his book, but he saw a point to it. But then he said, after I see this point and I was there was a lot that I paid, that my family paid, and a lot that these other men and women that were there paid as well.
And also remember, the movie was shown in Baghdad, and many of the Iraqis liked the movie.
See, this is
many of the Iraqis liked
American
the movie.
Propaganda, DOD.
Oh, here we go. This propaganda stuff. Here we go.
Frame
you knew just a matter of time. American propaganda.
The real sacrifice in Iraq was of the troops that went there for no reason to conquer Iraqi oil and kill the millions of people.
But I think the bigger question here is we're looking at Chris Kyle. Was it an accurate depiction of his life and the job that he did, or was he a racist for his beliefs when he was in war?
Yeah, but this kind of thing obfuscates what was done in Iraq, you know, and that's the intention.
And so does the movie Selma. There's going to be a generation of people that grow up not knowing that there were Jewish supporters there, not knowing there were Greek Orthodox religious people there, not knowing that Martin Luther King was driven by a strong religious belief in what he was doing.
Have you seen the movie?
Yeah, I saw it.
It's very clear that he was driven by a strong religious belief.
Not at all. Not at all. And it's not driven by the fact that there were a lot of other religious beliefs there. Greek Orthodox, You know, I don't want a white savior movie. We don't want Mississippi Burning or anything like that. I thought the movie was fantastic, well acted, well shot. Yeah. But it got across what the people that wanted.
Yeah. But it was wrong to make LBJ the villain. That's the problem I had.
LBJ was more concerned.
It was wrong to make LBJ the villain. There could have been other villains, such as George Washington.
I had more problem cutting out the rabbi than I did with LBJ, because I guess that's debatable. But
accurate.
Why weren't the people that are yelling about the Chris Kyle movie being nasty and a distortion of history also saying the same thing about Selma?
Okay, well, I think that we can agree to disagree on this movie. But I think what was interesting was it shed light on post-traumatic stress disorder and, you know, what the soldiers and veterans who are coming home are facing. And so we're taking out...
More so about individual soldiers. Not all the politics and everything that Mr. Bronner has to get into by definition.
Exactly.
Because
you are entitled.
Because he's Mr. Bronner.
Everyone is entitled to their opinion in this room.
Movies rewrite history all the time.
All the time.
All right. Well, now it's time to take some questions from our viewers. Hopefully lighten the mood a little bit.
There we are.
Is it possible... Oh, we're talking about the movie again. Is it possible that critics of the movie and its supporters are both right? And this question was from Joan Berry.
I mean, since you know, having seen the movie... the one scene everybody yells and screams about was he wakes up one morning and he sees the 9/11 attack and he's upset about this, and then we immediately cut to, you know, him being deployed into Iraq. The movie doesn't say that the Iraqi invasion and the Iraqi war was based on 9/11. That's just a visual scene that he depicts, because in his book he writes that seeing the attacks on the Twin Tower angered him, because he had a strong upbringing and a strong feeling that he needed to help people, he needed to save people, and he couldn't be there, and he saw people dying, and he wanted to get to a position where he could save American lives.
Next question is from Ken Banks, and he said, who is the stronger negotiating position, Greece or Germany?
I would say that Greece just changed, I mean, having come in, having just won this election, swept in, is the one who's in the position now to make really changes, you know, to demand some kind of either restructuring or talk about leaving the euro, which is, again, no matter what happens, it's going to spread to the rest of the EU countries that have been screwed over by this kind of EU policy that transmits so much of their national sovereignty of Europe to Brussels, you know, to this central authority, European Central Bank, which is manipulated by Angela Merkel. So,
Germany and the rest of the EU are in the driver's seat here. I think Greece will get some reworking of what they need to make things work. They'll see some probably write down of the debt to some level.
Would not have happened under their establishment.
Well, but I'm saying they'll get a little bit of what they want, but they can't push everything they want.
How about another stimulus package?
No, they're how
about that?
The French director or manager of their treasury said, after they said that they were talking to the Russians, said, well, I'm in no big hurry to release the rest of the money for them. So they can either sign the pact with the devil, which is Putin and the Russians right now, and I think that'll lead them down. Yeah, that'll lead them down the primrose towards being another Belarus or something along those lines.
Make a deal with the devil to get Rasputin.
Exactly.
There you go.
And but I think right now the Greeks think the new Greek government thinks that they're in control, but they're
Did
not.
you hear about the depression they're in now?
That
seems like kind of a disaster.
Well, depression can only mean bad things to the United States.
Yeah, that's not the Russians. That was the EU.
All right. Well, now it's time for our most underreported story of the week. Who would like to start?
I'll go.
Okay.
At the National Press Club on Monday night, there was a great and lively and spirited panel discussion and debate called Media Coverage of Race in America. And there were about 10 people on the panel at the Press Club, including the executive editor, Gilbert Bayon of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Obviously, he was there, of course, because of Wet Ferguson. And he, by the way, was also named Newspaper Editor of the Year. And Roland Martin from TV One, and Athena Jones from CNN, and several other people. And one of the interesting aspects of that panel was brought up in the context of the media coverage of race in America is somewhat skewed Why? Because people should be examining the media coverage of the media. You know, forget about covering the cities and the communities and Michael Brown and Trayvon Martin and Amir Rice and all these other cats. What about the media coverage of the media? Meaning, in much of the media, there is no D word, i.e. diversity. Because there are many newsrooms in this country, especially newspapers, where there are no people of color, you know, especially black folk. Zero, none. I mean, I know that from personal experience. And so one of the prevailing themes of that panel discussion was basically the media should get its own house right before criticizing somebody else's situation outside of its house.
Nick?
All right. Well, we're not inclined to picture nuclear war as a distinct threat anymore. It's fallen out of the media ever since the end of the Cold War. But renewed, intensive proxy warfare between Russia and the United States and NATO over the past couple of years, and with the long history before then, has now prompted the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists to move the doomsday clock to 3 minutes to midnight. So the closest to doom it's been since the Cold War.
Oh.
You know, the U.S. plans to spend $1 trillion over the next 10 years modernizing its nuclear weapons. That's about $8,000 per household in America that we're spending for the privilege of bringing the world closer to
a nuclear
apocalypse.
disaster.
So,
so you're saying it could be 62 all over again, the Cuban Missile Crisis all over again?
Well, I just agree on. Was it today or yesterday? The Russians flew bombers into the English Channel loaded with nuclear weapons.
Since the Manhattan Project, 9 countries have acquired nuclear weapons, and thanks to NATO weapon sharing programs, an additional 5 EU countries control American nukes. So a further dozen or so countries are considered paranuclear, meaning they have the technological capability to develop a nuke on very short notice. So, you know, between these countries, there's about 16,300 warheads exist. So during the Cuban Missile Crisis, President Kennedy ordered a blockade of Cuba. On October 27, 1962, a Soviet nuclear sub was patrolling nearby international waters when a U.S. Navy destroyer began dropping depth charges on it. The submarine was struck, the air conditioner filled, the cabin began to fill with carbon dioxide, it began to get extremely hot inside. It took 3 officers of Soviet nuclear subs to initiate a nuclear warhead launch, convinced that a nuclear war had already begun and they were failing their countrymen. The captain voted yes, fire. The crew turned to their political officer, he voted yes, fired. Lastly, they turned to the second in command, last man, who said alone, no, hold fire. An argument broke out, but he held his ground and convinced his captain not to launch. So 52 years ago, 3 months and 3 days from now, a man called Valery Arkhipov saved the world, and he's the only reason that we're here to discuss this now. This is one of literally dozens of such incidents, you know, so this is an existential question. If we continue on this path, with Russia, a lot of people like Mikhail Gorbachev, very famous people, have warned that, I mean, it could be the end.
Well, I was going to go with a more political one, but I'm going to go with something that's very near and dear to my heart. I think the NFL needs to do an investigation on who has been pulling the fire alarms at the Patriots Hotel every other night and waking them up. It's getting more and more serious. They've woken them up. Now they've gone to doing it at 5 a.m. in the morning, which doctors say is perfect timing because you cannot get back to sleep into REM sleep. So it's ruining the concentration of the Patriots.
Conspiracy theories?
And the NFL's got to look into this.
Conspiracy
I think that's the most underrated story this week.
Of the week.
Yeah. Other than the fact that the Patriots win the Super Bowl.
Oh, that's your prediction?
Patriots win, yes.
I agree with you.
Interesting.
All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for joining us this week. A lively debate, as always. That's all the time that we have. Tune in next week for another episode of The Square Circle.